Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this week's Kollective Foundations weekly live stream. We're glad that you're spending your Wednesday lunch hour with us from noon to 1. We've been planning to live stream from this platform for a while. You know how technology can be. Sometimes it'll humble you a little bit, but if you're watching this, we have outsmarted it. Okay, before we jump in, or I will say today's session, we are excited to have a very special guest, Dr. Stephon Ross, who will be talking to you today about retirement, how to think ahead, plan wisely, and how to build the kind of future that you would actually like to live in your retirement age. Before we jump in, check down by the comment section right on the right of it. There should be our link to our link tree where you can see any more information about us, any socials, events, websites that we may have. So get settled in, grab a snack, maybe a drink, maybe a pen so you can take some notes and make the most of this hour. Passing on to Dr. Ross.
Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon. A little about me. I started working with the federal government in 1997. I started out at the Federal Bureau of Prisons here in Beckley in the psychology department. And that's where you actually understand in life that there's a difference between having a job and having a career. So once you understand that there's a difference between having a job and having a career, you can plan accordingly. And fortunately, I had parents who directed me into that position of going into a career instead of just having a job. So what I did was I started working at the federal prison, and after my probationary period, I started to inquire about other things. And for the federal prisons, which is a federal law enforcement entity, you have, and a lot of government entities have what they call TSP, or the Thrift Savings Plan. So what that does is actually almost like a 401 or anything like that. What they do is they provide you with an opportunity to take part of your salary, before taxes, whatever, and put it into a big fund, basically 401k, and basically it's managed by both you and the government. So you can just throw money into this and it'll be diversified at a minimum. You can also go in and you can change and look at the funds and move it manually yourself to follow along with what you think is be the best. If I'm remembering correctly, the C fund was the most risky fund, so what I did was, I used that as a platform to balance out, my other aspects of retirement. You can also, like other things, you can also take the opportunity to get loans from them at a different interest rate than you would from being in a public entity. Like you would have a bank or a credit union, things of that nature. You can get loans from them, and then it comes directly out of your check. So, really you wouldn't be missing a lot of the things that you would as writing things and paying checks and paying bills on the outside. I was blessed, because when you have the federal law enforcement retirement, there is the provision of retiring 20 years in 25 years of service or 50. It's basically because of the risk of your job and the things that goes along with law enforcement, then they provide you with that opportunity. I was lucky enough, I started working at 26 and a half, 27. So at the end point, I retired. I was 51, year turned 52, and I retired. So I was blessed with that aspect. So what I did was I had left I left some money in the TSP, and it grew over the years. I didn't really mess with it. I don't, there's other elements to that. You have to be cognizant of the fact that you in your home life, or what you decide, or what your goals are in life. For me, my goals were, to be able to relax. After having so many years of, I worked 5 years inside the federal prisons, and then I started working for the Federal Air Marshal Service, and working with the Federal Air Marshal Service, I was on the go consistently, different states, different countries, a lot of things go on, and living in the Detroit metro area, and then moving to the DC metro area, for the Federal Marshal Service, and then I lived in, of course, Beckley, and also Las Vegas, Nevada, for the prison system. You kind of get the opportunity to see how so many things are going on in the world, and not only the world, but your country. And so what I did, I started small things to plan. It took me a long time to understand that, you have to tone down the things and your wants, and there's a difference between wants and needs, and desires and wants, and once you learn how to take the opportunity to slow down and educate yourself, then you can have something as a nest egg, as they would say, at that time and point. For me, I was pushed. My father was an educator, so education was a thing for me on the back burner, always on the back burner. So more of my time was pushed towards doing small things to educate myself on anything that was interesting to me. I went to Concord. I graduated from Woodrow here, Beckley, and then I went on to Concord for 3 years, and then I ended up leaving Concord and then 2 years in the Army, came back to Concord and finished up, and that's when I started to work actually with Preston Ridge, and I think that was probably one of the initial times that me and Mr. Burton met each other, was there, but then I actually left Preston Ridge and went to Ohio Center in Ohio, and then I came back, and that's when I started my initial journey into the government, working in the prison system. So,
real quick, I'm not to cut you off, but real quick. So if we were talking to a child, right, and you were saying about, when you're talking about retirement, you were talking about a lot of getting your nest egg and things of that nature. But how can I trust, what makes me able to trust to put my money in somewhere or wherever? Because I might be living check to check.
Right.
So how would they have some education for us to sit down and talk to? Like I want to go into a career now. Right. I was working the job first. Now I want to go into a career. How can I, be assured that my money is just going somewhere where I can see it?
The thing is, and I was that person, exactly the person you're talking about. Even working in a career, the mindset is, I'm giving somebody what I've been out here sweating and doing for, and you have to, the good book says you got to work by faith and not by sight, a lot of times. So I leaned on that a lot, with today's economy, for not only today's economy, one of the things I went through working for the government is the fact when we had a recession. So just to give an example, I was working and living, and I think at that time and point, I was just developing money. I mean, it was I could look online and see I had $175,000 in my, I'm happy, you young, but then you come back the next 2-3 weeks and I got $50,000. Where my money go? What was going on? I'm calling people. They saying, sir, this is we're in a recession. This is happening. I'm cussing. Hey, wait a minute! I put money in here. Y'all can't be taking my money. Who I need to talk to? I need to see your supervisor. But in reality, it's going to have the ups and downs. That's the scariest part about it. The scariest part about it, and you're trusting somebody else. You're trusting somebody else with what you feel, and but then that's the biggest thing about learning to understand the difference between having a job and a career and living paycheck to paycheck. If you have $500, then you need to make sure that $500 you get for that week, you need to take $50 of that and put it somewhere that whether you have a safe at home or a lot of our grandparents and parents done it and we never knew about it as kids. You know, they had money in a shoebox. They had money, grandma kept it in a brazier, whatever the case may be. But you have to get over that fear, because the other man used to say, scared money don't make money. Yeah. So, you have to get over that little bit of fear,
Let me interject just 1 minute. Now, you said the $100,000 that you had in the account, you came back and $50,000 was gone. Now, was the other $50,000 invested somewhere else in your name, or did you just lose it all?
No, I didn't lose it all. It was still invested. It was still, money was still making money, but because of the recession, where I was going on a more riskier term, because I was looking, I want money. You risk more, you make more. So that risk didn't pay off at that time and point. But then the other D, E, and F funds that you have, was still maintaining a steady climb. When you plan, and it's not really planned, but when you have the market going for your retirement, or you have the government using your money for other things, then those things do happen. I'm no market whiz. I just made sure that they tell you every year that they give you what is it? If you put in 5%, they'll match 5%. If you put in 7%, they may match up to 5%, or maybe up to 10 or 12%, however it is. So yeah, I maybe put in 12% and I lost 2%, but I still may have that other 10%, or so the market continues to climb. It's almost like being in the ocean, that boat and waves, and if you bit there and you watch it every day, it'll drive you crazy. You'll be, scary. And it's something I just learned at 54, going to church and doing your tithes and offerings. You don't know when or if God's going to bless you with an abundance, but you're riding that wave because you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're doing your tithes, your due diligence, doing those things that you're supposed to be doing. So, when you're dealing with the market and you're dealing with retirement, you have to look at that and hope those, due diligence comes in your benefit. I was lucky enough that I had, at 51, I had enough time in that have a decent pension. At the end of the time, what I did was I took and made sure that all my little credit cards and anything I could have pay off was paid off. I was blessed because my mother and father, when they died, they left me and my brother home. So I came back home. I didn't have that mortgage. Most people have to pay. I don't have a wife. I don't have any kids. So that changes, the dynamics. My dynamics is that's the thing about being retired. You have to look at your dynamics. You can't look at what everybody else is doing or how anybody else is doing, because everybody's situation is different. And that difference is, you may not be able to put in $100 every month. You may only be able to put in $25. But as long as you put in something, that gives you an opportunity to have more money in the end. And that's what I did. I took and put in what I could. There was some years was better. I was putting in more than other years. But I was always one of those people that thought that you got to live by paycheck to paycheck. And if I'm working, I can get what I want. And it ain't like that. You wake up real quick, and you wake up and you got 4 or 5 people calling you saying, you owe me this money and you owe that money and this bill wants that. And it's not like that. You have to learn to not only save, but you have to time management and differentiate your money. Pay your bills when you're supposed to, pay things on time. And I was haphazard with credit. I learned that you got to pay those bills too. You can't say I got a credit card. I think I can just run in here and charge it to the moon. It doesn't work that way. So if for a young person or a person who's looking to retire in the future, what you want to do is set a goal, and what your goal is. Say you want to be a millionaire by the time you're 65. Well, now you have so many different dynamics to look at. You can look at who you're working for. If they got a 401, if they don't have a 401, if they have a Roth IRA, if they don't have a Roth IRA, then you have to go on the outside and find some companies that may have these things to offer you. And then you have to find out, which bank or which credit union is going to be best for you, so you can have your money automatically transferred to them, so you don't have the opportunity to get your hands on it as quickly as. So sometimes it's it goes and you don't see it. You know, that's what helped me a great deal, is the fact that I didn't get my hands on it. You know, it came out of my check before it hit my account, you know, directly to the TSP. And the TSP, you know, once a month or once every 3 months, I go back and look and see what, you know, if it's on the up or if it's on the downswing or how it may be. And that helps, you know, that helped me on that aspect.
So a young person in his 20s,
Yes.
maybe even 19,
Mm-hmm.
they're not ready for a career yet. I'm, just speculate. They're not ready for a career yet. If they're not ready for a career yet, how would you, talk to them and try to explain to them that a career would be good or a career would be bad?
I would first provide them with, the difference between a job and a career. A job is just the point of you going in and basically punching the clock every day and not having a back end benefit. You know what I'm saying? You want a career that's going to give you some back end benefit. And so, you go to a job and you don't have health benefits. You may not have anything that's going to continue you in survival rate. All you're doing is gain the money. You're providing a service for money. When you have a career, you don't only just provide a service for money, but it's also taking care of you on the other end. You have health, you have possible elements for retirement, these types of things. We all pay into Social Security, but we all don't have the same benefit to get that Social Security. Like me, I'm 54, and I can't get Social Security until I'm 62. But I have a stipend from the government that pays me because of where I worked at and who I worked for, so I get a stipend in between there. So now not only do I get my pension, I get a stipend from my TSP and I set it up that way because I knew that in between this time period, I wasn't going to be making that, But then also, I do other jobs, I work online and things like that. And also, you can't, I ain't gonna say you can't. You don't want to be in a situation where you're just retired and you're not doing anything, because statistics have shown that people who just go home and become a vegetable or don't do anything, they end up dying. You still have to have something that's stimuli that's going to keep you motivated, keep you doing some things, and that alone in itself, you might as well do something that's going to be profitable to you as well.
Well, okay, so that's why, and I appreciate you coming, on Kollective Foundations and, with a moment's notice, but that's kind of why, not being funny, that's why I wanted to talk to you. Because my thing is, who does that? I mean, who does that at that age? I don't know of anybody other than, not being funny, I know, Elder McCray, he's retired, but he worked a long time. And not saying you haven't either, but to be so young, and to be, but my thing is more mentally. So I just, mentally, how does that, like you said, you still have a lot to give, but you got to think you done gave, so much, but then it's like, well, what's next? What's next? And I know, you told him you're a doctor, so we know that, you got your doctorate, and I know you was working on that at the same time, but is that, for you, is that what was going on as far as to put something else in place from when you did retire?
That was one of the biggest things I wanted to do. I wanted to make sure that I had an opportunity, if this retirement thing right off the bat didn't work for me, I was going to have the best step forward, the best foot forward for myself if I decided to say, okay, I don't like this retirement thing, I got to go back and do something. So I wanted to be able to say, okay, I've been retired 5 years, Mr. Burton. I need to do something. So here's my resume. And at the top of my resume, it's not going to just say, well, I worked 25 years with the federal government. It's going to say, he did 25 years with the federal government, but he also has a master's in forensic psychology. He also has a doctorate in psychology, concentrated criminology. He also has done 12, 15 foreign countries, 47 states of the United States, and he's dealt with everybody from drug addicts to criminals. So, I wanted to be able to have a complete presentation of who I am and what I am if I decide to get back out into the workforce. And then, like I said, I work online. I do teaching online because I want to maintain a mental acuity to what's going on in the world, what's going on in society. And you can't just become a vegetable. You just can't sit around and yeah, it's things I've always wanted to get into. Yeah, I go fishing, I love guns. I cut grass. It's lots of things I can do, but those things are more or less hobbies or personal interests, more so than opportunity of going out. And you want. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I can't sit back and do nothing right now. I can sit back. I'm in Beckley, West Virginia. I can sit back and do nothing because I'm in Beckley, West Virginia. You know what I'm saying? And like I said, the biggest thing is that my home is paid for. You know what I'm saying? I have a home. Me and my brother have a home, and it's paid for. My mother and father left a situation where the home was paid for. And one of the biggest things for me also is in 2004, in June of 2004, my father died. My father died. My father died sitting at his desk, signing his retirement papers, and I said I would not do that. I said I would not allow any corporation, any part of this world, it was going to run me into the ground, And my mother died the year before, and I asked my father. My father had a complete conversation. I was like, "So what are you going to do? How are you going to do this?" And he said, "Well, I think I'm turning my paperwork." He said, "Well, I was actually ready to fly to Arizona, sitting in the Philadelphia airport working, and my brother calls me and says, hey, Dad just died. So wait a minute. He was signing his retirement papers. He's ready to do his thing, and he was 58 years old. So, that changes my dynamics of the thought process of life. If I go home and sit down on the couch and die at home, I know that I was happy, I was at peace, nobody ran me into the ground.
I think it's that's not funny, but it's just something when you said that, because just Friday we were doing a kids camp, and we had took some kids to Stratton.
Right.
So it was hot. So
right.
I was trying to find some shade, so I go to this tree.
Right.
I go to this tree, and I'm talking to this man. We talking about something, and I look down, and there's a plaque of your dad, and then I went in, and he. Well, who's this, and I went into it, but then I said, and that's what I said. He actually died. I mean, it wasn't down at the new school, down that in that location, but right where. I mean, he said that right here. I said, I don't know if it was right here, right where this plaque is, but it was where the school was. But in our mind, going back to our thinking, and I knew your dad for a long time, worked with him,
right.
But to me, that's what. That's what it's about. I know it ain't about that. That's not what you was about, but that work. Yeah. That's what it's about. I don't know what it's like not to work. I mean, I'm not trying to be funny, but so retirement, I ain't even. And I'm 53, so I mean, you're. I didn't even know you just a year older than me, but I'm like, I ain't nowhere near thinking about retirement. But that's the thing, But that's why I said seeing people like me, that's kind of like an anomaly. You don't see that a lot. People that young, retiring, and then, but. Because I know your story a little more, but you did actually enter the job market back again after you retired. Is that? I mean, I'm talking business.
You did. Yeah, I left.
What I mean, was that about a little bit about what we were talking about, that mental aspect?
Yeah, it was the mental aspect. I was to the point where I came back to West Virginia, and I was like, man, what in the world did I do? It hit me because I'm in Beckley, West Virginia, and I talked to some people, and they said, well, here, call this company. I called the company, and I still had maintained the top secret security clearance I had. And they said, well, here, let's do an interview with the phone. Did the interview with the phone, and the man said, we'll offer you $98,000. In West Virginia? So he offered me $98,000. I was like, all right, well, sure. When I need to be there. So I went there, and I realized that it wasn't for me because I left that environment. The point of dealing with people, dealing with nonsense, and then the thing is that I left the environment from where I was seeing people and like-minded people going into a public environment of being enclosed, people talking about, gymnastics practice and with their kids and this. I didn't want to hear all that. That's not me. You got people talking, soccer moms talking about, Billy got a bloody nose because he tripped over his shoes, and I didn't grow up like that. You get up, you wipe it off, you're back on the field, do what you're supposed to do. I grew up, you get out of football practice, you got to cut the grass, you got to take out the trash, you got to feed your dog. And when mom and dad say it's time to eat, you eat. My dad's rule in his household, I don't tell you anything twice in my household, And that's how I grew up. And it's really difficult for me to deal with some of the things that go on in today's world. My brother, I tell my brother all the time, I say, I'm put my name on the substitute list. And he looks at me and shakes his head, no, you can't do that. And I'm like, why can't I? He said, that's not your environment. He just tells you, that's not your environment. He said, one or two things going to happen. Either you're going to walk out of school or you're going to get in trouble. Because I'm going to tell people how I feel. I don't hold my tongue. I'm not going to sit down and have no kid. No, I'm not going to have a person, let alone a kid, huff, cuss, spit, or I throw him against the wall, turn him around, and the cops come get him, or whatever it can be. So it wouldn't be a good environment. It's not going to be a good look at, So, and that's why I understand that, I realize my limitations. I realize that me teaching online or at the college level is going to be the best thing for me to do. I realize that, maintaining my small circle of people who are friends or people is the best thing for me to do. I've been in law enforcement for 25 years. 5 of those years was working inside federal prisons. So, it's very few people that I do trust or people that I interact with.
Right.
So, that's another thing, when you leave your environment to the point of you want to retire, then you got to know what you're going to, like Don, he's 51, 53?
53.
He's 53. He said he has no thought process of retiring. But that's because his process has been about work. But in the reality of the situation is, he's not thinking about work. He's thinking about, okay, my children, what I'm going to leave for them, how I'm going to leave it for them. Do I have anything that if I was to die tomorrow that would cause them problems? That that's the normal process in life. That's why I said, when I started out, I don't have a wife, I don't have kids. So that changes the dynamic of who you are, what you are. That's why I sit here and see guys. I talked to a guy the other day. He told me he has 6 kids, and 1 has already graduated, 1 is 7, and the rest are younger. And I asked him, and he works at a daggone restaurant. I looked at him, I was like, what were you thinking? Oh, well, things just happen. No, you're going to be working from now to 95. You're already 35, 40 years old, and you got a kid that's under 5, and you got 2 different mamas, baby mamas, or whatever. Right. That's a whole different dynamic. You got to work.
Right. So and that's why I said, I think a lot, so some of the things we do, when we're young and not thinking them out, can come back to kind of haunt us in the end. And of course, not the kids. That's not the part, but definitely, while we do love the kid, we got to take care of the kid. Yeah. And it takes a lot of money. So the older they get, the more money is going to take in order to take care of them. But then you got the other part, like you said, for what after. Right. What after? What I'm going to have set up for them when they leave. And that's so that means I have to extend and work more. That's why I said, even having that plan. So going back to when you first started, talking is something you said about, but the role models that you did have, but everybody's not going to have what you had. Right. Everybody's going to have, mom and dad, both of them working, both of them, working hard, definitely. So we have to think of them somewhere and have to have that foundation somewhere. And I think sometimes it's, having people, like yourself, Elmer Cray, Mike, having them around to see and maybe even pick their brain. Because that's the thing. You have to ask questions, and the kids don't know. Even an adult, it don't have to be a kid. Right. I always say that always. We talk about career and job. Well, there's nothing wrong with me now if I went down to McDonald's and got a job. Right. It's okay. That's the thing. But now, long term, is that going to be okay? Stand on your feet. It's very busy. Right. I'm getting older, and you working with kids who are very younger than you. A lot younger than you. So it is something we have to think about. And I think that's why, we really have to go back to getting the foundation of just, getting some of the, the skills we need. Mike's young. Like I said, we talked about that last week when he spoke, on here last week about that, being young and being focused on what, the thing. But the foundation is there for him to have that. So we have to, come up with something, something for the kids to have or adults.
Well, like you said, the thing is, it's not the point that job and career, but you can go into McDonald's working the job and that's being at the front line doing this, that, and everything else. But in the reality of it, if you go into management, now you're going into a career.
That's right.
So therefore, you have to understand your goals and your steps for where you want to go.
Right.
So if you don't set forth any goals or any steps, and all you want to do is punch a clock, then you're hindering yourself. It's just like, even going back to the point of, having kids. One of the biggest things I used to tell these guys who were bringing home multi-million dollars in work inside when I was in the federal prison, these guys were drug dealers or tax evaders. They always talk about they had these kids and everything else. But if you're not spending time with that child, providing that child with any education or providing that child with anything other than money, then the only thing they're going to care about is that money. So therefore, you're going to lose that child anyway.
Right.
So you have to look at that on another aspect, and then we as a people, and Don will tell you this. He's always seen me doing something a little different. I'm a little different than most people. One of the things that for me in life was focus. Things physically that came naturally to me, I focused on very easily. Reading, doing math, or sitting down talking to older people, I would love to sit and talk because I love to pick their brains. But sitting down and listening to them, read for me or me reading with them, I get to it. Not that I couldn't read,
Right.
or I couldn't do the math. I just get to it. You know what I'm saying? But as I've gotten older, I've learned to not only read but to study.
Right.
And we as a people have to get back to reading, writing, and studying, because that will give you an education. So when I do come talk to you, Don, about whatever you want, how you doing this job, how you doing that, now I can pick your brain. I'll be educated enough to have a decent conversation with Don to understand what he's doing. Same about being, when I was getting ready to retire, I was 2, 3, 4 years out. So I started looking at other guys I know was planning on doing this, planning on doing that. I talked to some of the guys that had already retired, Then I started picking other people's brains. Who y'all doing? Well, you got this lady who's retired from us, and she's working on Facebook, but you have to get introduced to her group. So then, of course, now what I'm doing is I'm paying attention to what we have and how they're working the market, how they're doing this, how they're doing that. When it was time for me to retire, they give you a packet. The packet's that thick. You got all this stuff going on, you got this, that, and everything. Who's the beneficiary, who's this, who's that, and everything else, I took my packet and I'm like, well, man, whoa, I'm trying to read for a class to write a paper, and here is another class on just my retirement. So, I got on the phone. I started calling people, and then, eventually you get to the point where there's people who specialize in just doing that.
Right.
So, you have to use all your resources and all your assets to do things. If I wanted to understand more about the Bible, I'm not going to McDonald's to talk to the manager. I'm going to the minister to get that knowledge. So it's time for me to retire. I'm taking notes. I'm talking to people on the phone. I'm sending emails. I'm printing things off. And then, when it actually the time came, I got in touch with the lady who actually used to work for the OPM, and she's retired now. But her thing is, you provide her with the information. You know who she is. She gives you all the information, so you know it's not a scam or whatever the case may be. And she'll walk you right through how to fill out your packet, what you want to do, where you want to do it, this, that, and everything else. And okay, so I'm good with that. And that's exactly what I did. And then submitted my packet and everything. And, I was in, it was funny because one of the guys I used to always talk to, at the time I was working at the command center, and I told him, yeah, it's almost about this time to retire and everything. He was like, yeah, okay, yeah, we're all going to get here pretty soon. And he tells everybody, he says, yeah, Ross is gone. What do you mean Ross is gone? Ross said he was about ready to retire. And next thing you know, he wasn't here. And that's exactly where I wanted to be. I want to come in like a puff of smoke, and I want to leave like a vapor. You know what I'm saying? And all I did, I kind of hedged my bets. I took half of the money that I had in my TSP and I moved it. So then I have this money over here still making money, and this money over here still paying me. And none of it's taken out of my pension. So I'm just
But that was due to the education you got from it, right?
Right. That's due to the education.
Due to the
Start
education,
moving,
right.
start talking to people.
So tell me, so I know, like I said, I know you retired now. You said, did you say 5 or 6 years before you retired you started getting this education? Is that right?
Right, yeah.
But now you looking back, when should we do that then?
In reality,
Right.
from the day that you realize you have a career, you should be educating yourself. And the reason why I say that is because I don't want to sound negative and derogatory, but we as black people wait till the last minute to do just about everything. And by that time, it's too late.
But that's why we have you on.
Right, so-
That's why you have you on. You just said some valuable information.
Yeah.
Like you said, so when we start the career,
When you start your career,
which is now we starting, because the two things with that, that's now giving me the mindset, I want to work this career out.
Right.
I mean, that's one of the
Right.
things. And then another thing is now I'll be set up for when that happens. And then I can find different avenues. Because it may not be your avenue
Right.
that we're going to take, but we can take another different avenue.
And then the benefit of that is, if you start from day one stepping into that office or wherever you're working at, and it's a career, you may get 5 years, 6 years down the road, and something happens. You know, as you see it all the time, CEOs go somewhere else. This company's bought out by another company, or whatever the case may be. But if you got 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, 10 years in, and you've been putting money into this 401 or this Roth IRA or TSP or whatever the case may be, and they shut down your department, you may have 10 years of experience doing whatever you're doing and really don't know what you're going to do. But you still have this money over here that you can pick that money, take some of that money, and move it to another company or move to another part of the state or another whatever, and use that benefit to go over here. Now, the way things are today, you may not have to go anywhere. You could be at home working, doing whatever you did from home, but you still have a little bit of nest egg over here. Now, the new company that you work for, you may be able to roll that money into that new company. So, therefore, you have to, once again, like he said, you have to educate yourself from day one of what's going on. If I came to work for Don tomorrow, there's two things I'm going to ask him. I'm going to ask him the pay and benefits. I want to know all my pay and my benefits. And then I want to know all the policies I need to know to maintain this job to the best of my ability. So when I'm talking pay and benefits, I'm not just talking salary. I'm talking about health. I'm talking about if we got any retirement. If we don't have retirement, 401k, Roth. If not, can I subsidize my pay to go to another one? You know, is it automatically direct deposit? If it's not direct deposit, what days am I supposed to get my checks? I mean, are there delays on holidays? I mean, you have to sit down and have a list of things, you know, just like I would hand him my resume. I don't want to come in with a notebook of questions after we do the interview, when we do the interview, because I want to be more prepared. Because Don he could be bought out by freaking the Salvation Army tomorrow. And they may give him $1.2 billion. They give him $1.2 billion. How is he going to take care of everybody below him? But see, the problem is in the United States, you have guys who get that $1.2 billion and they disappear. Now they're worried that everybody else is just out. Right. So, but I want to be able to know that if I work for him 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, and he gives me $1,000 a week, so I know that I want to put $250 a week in some kind of account, not just a savings account. I want it somewhere. So in case he decides to go or the company does not do what it's supposed to do, boom, you know. So that's.
So you saying putting that money, wouldn't that be on your part, not on the job's part? I mean,
right. It's not right, but
that
see,
would be on your part.
it'd be on my part. But I would also ask that fact if he has anything set up with another company. You know, he could have a JP Morgan account. He could have another. You know, he could have an investment account. He could, so whoever, you know. And if he's doing that as an investment, or if he becomes a public entity, then can I get investment? You know, maybe I don't want a big salary. Maybe I just want a minimal salary. But the top part, I want to be an investment so I can invest back in the company and be a shareholder.
Yeah.
So now that's a whole.
So what if we dealing with young kids that are not educated? Not saying that they, you know,
Right.
they're not educated. Doesn't have a college background. How would we push them into an area to tell them that education would be good for them. You know, because a lot of people nowadays saying education is not good for you, don't go to college. You know what I'm saying? But what would be the best way to mentor them and tell them that education would be good for them?
You know, I dealt with that when I was dealing with the guys in drug treatment. You know, because these guys were running corporations on the corner.
Yeah.
See, your education, there's a difference between education and academics.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we go to school, we get academic education.
Right.
But what we survive on is street education. See, that's the difference between you having someone who comes in and wants to talk to you about things that's happening all the time, this and that thing, but they don't have no life experience. So you take that kid who has no high school or college academic education, and you relate it to exactly what they do on the street. So if you have a guy who's moving, I hate to put it, a kilo of cocaine on the corner, you change and tell him, okay, you're doing customer service. Not only are you doing customer service, you have lieutenants under you, so therefore, you know, you're breaking things out, you're branching out, you're doing networking, you're doing this. But now you got to relate that to the point of doing actual jobs. So your actual job is you cutting 1 yard a day and you only making this amount. Now you got to get 10 yards. So even though you got 10 yards or 15 yards or 20 yards, you got to take some of that money and do it in a positive way. Not only just saving it, but you got to do it another way to invest it or another, you know.
Changing the focus.
Right, yeah.
Changing your focus.
So those aspects, yeah.
And that's what you're saying and you were saying, like you said about, you know, education, things of that nature. That's a lot of it as well. As far as the education he's talking about is just sitting down and speaking with people about certain things. Mm-hmm. But I think, you know, there's also, you know, the academic education as well. But the power of the pen, writing things down. You got your phone, Google, different things like that. He's saying words, and like he said a couple words, I didn't even know what it was. But that doesn't mean you can't go to Google. What do you mean by that? And I'm gonna tell you why I say that, because I mean I was doing at Pressy Ridge, and we were doing a interview with a kid at a place, and I'm watching the lady write it down. She writes his word down, disheveled. This is the word she wrote down. I'm like, and I've never really heard of it. So I'm like, you know, think about it. I didn't tell her that, but then I went and looked it up. She was talking about his appearance. She was talking about the kid's appearance, you know, disheveled, which kind of made me feel some kind of way because I took him up there. Now, of course, I didn't dress him, but right. I took him up there. But then, and more I thought about it, more made me want to think, you know, we need to get, you know, educated on that part of it as well. Especially, you know, taking them to the interview, having them dressed in a proper way is right. Absolutely. As well. Because they writing that pen down, they writing certain things down. So education does come into it, but just knowing it as well. I'm not saying we all gonna get to go back to school or we're all gonna have time for that, but definitely sit down with somebody with a pad and a pen and writing things down to where you really, you know, realize if you can't catch it. Because a lot of people want to be smart. I get that, but guess what? I didn't know the word. It was a word he said. I didn't know it. So it's okay. Write it down and go back and look it up. But that's what, you know, we have to do. Educate, you know, the youth, even old adults. That's why I said, I mean, even that, you know, having, you know, Dr. Ross in here today, just thinking about it in my head, just thinking about, you know, it's not only kids that need this type of education, or definitely about retirement is also. So even having, you know, through the summit or whatever, I mean, even partnering up with someone to come in and speak about retirement and bringing kids in, putting it on, you know, online or whatever the case may be. It's a lot of things online that I don't think we look at. Sometimes we look at other things, but these are some of the things we need to look at. This is how it is. Of course it is.
And the thing about that is, once you start getting into a subject, no matter what the subject matter is, you got to realize that there are levels to each subject. So if he comes in and he says, okay, he wants to have someone come in and do retirement, he's going to have to break it down to the point of, this is retirement for the younger generation, for them to understand. Then you have to go to the point of the middle-aged teenager, then going to the young adult, and then going to the people who've already started working. Because if you come in there with someone from JP Morgan or wherever, Lincoln Financial, whoever, and he comes in with his PowerPoint and all his work and everything, and you got a bunch of high school, or it's not going to work. You know, and then definitely you're going to have someone to be able to cater to their interests.
You probably know this, working at Pressy Ridge. A lot of times, I will speak to people. This is not disrespectful, but I'll speak to them like that. not in a way to where and it's not me, down on their intelligence, but I need to know that you know this right here now, the simple part. Because if we can skip over to this the real intricate part, advanced part. If you don't know this, it doesn't matter. I went back when we first started. We wasn't taping, but we were on there. Remember when I was talking about Coming to America, the scene where he had the mop bucket. Prince Akeem had the mop bucket. Right now, he told them he knew how to mop, but when you really looked at it, he didn't know how to mop. Now he had the motivation to do it, but he didn't know how to do it. So but I like what the guy said. Hey, just take the mop out of the bucket, and it just confuse you. Just take the mop out of the bucket and put it on the ground. It's just that simple. So we can't miss the, can't miss, was it a cart from the horse or something? That's an older saying. But I mean, you can't miss the fact of being, so people take that as like, what are you talking about? You think I'm stupid? No, I don't think you're stupid. I'm just making sure we can do this first. Because then once you figure it out, this, with the Press Ridge way is, either you're motivated to do it or you don't want to do it. It's either way. I mean? It's one thing if you don't know how to do something, but it's another thing if you need to be taught how to do it, and then we can go from there. But if you know how to do it now Stephon knows how to mop, then come in tomorrow, he ain't mop. He don't want to mop. He don't want to mop. It ain't the fact he don't know how to do it no more. He just don't want to do it. So, let's not go around saying, having excuses about we don't know. I'm not saying now we know. We're steered in the right direction about some retirement, about definitely seeing a person retired, and then also how the plan. Now, it might not be his plan, but he still's laying the groundwork for us and me. This ain't only for the people we watch that was watching here. It's for me too. I'm not retired. You are. I mean, of course. So 2 out of 4 are retired. You know what I mean? And that's the thing. But definitely, you get my mind thinking about these things as well. I do have a few things, but I don't watch them. I do have a few things in place, but I just don't watch it as much as I did. But when I did watch it one time, when I did have a retirement, it didn't look good, and I got out of it. You know what I mean? Because it didn't look right. It wasn't what she told me it was going to be. And I was like, well, this ain't what you told me, and I didn't like it. So.
And that's everybody's apprehensive on that, because once again, it's money. It's two things that in life that as a black man that you don't mess with. You don't mess with my money. You don't mess with my family. Those two things are just paramount. That's what you've been taught all your life. Your father's fathers taught that. And continues to go on. You don't mess with my money. You don't mess with my family. So once you have that opportunity, that you think you're gaining knowledge, you think you have an opportunity to get a leg up, and whoa, that leg's not there, or whoa, you only got half a leg. Now you start to get very apprehensive. You get very fearful. You don't want to reach out and do these things, but. I come to the point now. I look at it as the situation is okay. Yeah, it's there, and I see it's there, but when it wasn't there, did I cry about it? When it wasn't there, did I not? Because I never knew about it. You know what I'm saying? As a man, I look at the sacrifices of my parents had. I know good and well that my parents didn't have the opportunities and the money and stuff that I made. I mean, I made money that I know my father and mother didn't make in salary. So, all those years that I was out here flying around the world, throwing $100s and $200s and $300 around like I was Johnny Mac, they didn't have that opportunity, that chance. So, when you are dead and gone, that bill collector can't get nothing from you. What the old people say, you can't get blood from a turnip.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? So you do the best you can while you can. And keep on pushing, keep on kicking. I would love to have a multi-million-dollar nest egg to do this, that, and everything else. But I'll take that $1,000 there right now and be happy and continue to push and keep on going with that.
Nothing's more humbling than a child and the way a child thinks. I mean, like I said, we're in camp now. For the last 2 days, we've been going out. And we go out every day, but we're going out, and they were doing bag lunches. So we were kind of figuring out what to put in this bag lunch. And, we came down with, because this is what the kids like, peanut butter and jelly. Yeah. I mean, all the things. I mean, we talking about, turkey, sliced turkey, ham. No. But they just like peanut butter and jelly. And of course, some other things with it, fruit and stuff like that. But that's the thing. Just what you said. I think it's us, and when we get older, some of our desires, some of our, things, our pleasures become more extravagant. But we got to think about that end part, like you said before, too.
The other scary part about that is, we all harp on education, but the more educated you are, the more you want to see, the more you want to do, the more curiosity, but there were people before us who didn't have as much and were a whole lot happier than us and lived a whole lot longer than we did. So once you add things, even though you're educated and this, the more you add, the more stress you're providing on yourself and on your body. So therefore, you have to maintain that balance or foundation where you may not have to worry about as stuff. You know, if you got one kid, okay, I'm taking care of one kid. You got 10 or 15 kids, now we got a whole different story. You see what I'm saying? So you got to maintain that thought process. Yeah, every situation's gonna be different. Every person's gonna be different. Every opportunity's gonna be different. But you have to break it down to, like Don's hit, the brass tacks of what every situation is, and then grow from there. So when you come to retirement, you break it down to what you want and to what you need. I didn't need much. I didn't have a wife. I didn't have kids. I already had a home. Now everything else that's on the outside of that is either become a part of my wants and desires, because my needs have been taken care of. From working, I've got insurance, health insurance. From working, I have a pension, and I have a place to stay. So once you get that down to the point there, everything else is a bonus. Any extra money I make outside of paying the little bills or whatever I have is a bonus.
That's good.
You see, you know, if I want to do this, that, and everything, it's a bonus. But then you know, like I say, if I want to sit around and be a vegetable all day, no, I can't be. You know, so I got to do something.
Before we leave, though, real quick, when you were saying about, so because I know you work many places, like many different cities, and in the United States, and maybe even some abroad, but you know, would your retirement plan would have changed if you would have landed and stayed in Vegas or maybe in DC? You know, if you understand what I'm saying. That's the thing. I mean, because definitely, while we talk about it not being a big metropolis, but it is very good financially as far as not having to worry about some of the...
Being in the state of West Virginia, something else people don't look at, my federal retirement money, my pension money, is not taxed by the state of West Virginia. You know, you go to other places, and other states will tax that money. Okay, so living in Las Vegas, you know, they don't have a state tax. So that changes things. You have to maintain, and once you start educating yourself, you got to educate where you want to live. Me being in the DC area, one of the highest prices cost of living, you know, so now I would be living in an apartment or paying for another house or whatever the case would be, and $3,500 a month is not unreasonable. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So, you know, and that's just for if I decide to get in the house. So I was living in an apartment. Now I'm looking at $1,800, $2,500. So, you know, those things change your money.
Not owning the apartment.
Right, not owning the apartment.
Not having.
Yeah. I lived in, and when I was in DC for 7 years, 10 years, I lived in a 1-bedroom, 1-bath apartment, the bottom of a house, and I was paying $1,200 a month. So, you know, you and that was the cheapest place I found. The only reason I got that place is because the guy that owned the house worked with me.
Okay.
Now, right up the street was 1-bedroom apartments, and they started out at $2,100. And then you had to pay for your parking permit. So now you're looking at another $200, $300. Right. So, you know, where you live, how you live is a huge aspect of where your retirement's going to take you, what you're going to do with your retirement. Because if I was living in Vegas, it'd be comparable to being here, because I don't have a state tax. But I would have another job. I guarantee I would either punch in a clock or doing something, because Vegas will not allow you to just maintain money. Mm-hmm. It's something you're going to go to shows. If you're not going to shows, it's something it's going to make you reach in your pocket. Vegas is all about making you reach in your pocket. So, and in the DC area, it's all about knocking you out, taking your money. One way, you know, I mean, whether you want to or not, you know.
I ain't going to DC.
You know what I mean? I lived in Sterling, Virginia, outside of Sterling, Virginia, and I was within 3 miles of Dulles Airport, where I flew out of. But on the street that I lived on was not even a block away from the highway, Within that highway and within the 10-mile radius, I had 116 different restaurants, 3 different malls, and not including the mom and pop stores, Dulles Town Center, the freaking Washington Redskins training facility, 3 gun ranges. You know, it just things right there. You're gonna, but everything costs. And then the sad thing about it is, you fill your gas tank up on Monday. On Wednesday, you refill it up because you may just want to go to work, but you get caught in traffic and you may be sitting in traffic for 40 minutes. So you leave at 4 in the morning. You got to be at work at 6. You may be just getting there at 6. So, you know, and everybody wants to ride the public transportation, but I'm not the kind of guy. I can't see riding a train or bus or whatever. It's an emergency happen. Now you got to go out here and try to get an Uber or try to get somebody. You can't, because the train don't run on your schedule. You run on train schedule.
Right. Well, like I said, we're just wrapping up. Like I said again, we as with the Summit Collective, would like to thank you, Dr. Ross, for coming on. Lot of nice, gem knowledge. Gems of knowledge that we needed to have. We love to try to, get something going and parlay something with somebody, retirement, presentation, just to get it out there on the website, at least for someone to see. Like you said, but definitely different levels.
Right.
Definitely different levels of those things. And like I said, for us, you are our first guest. Like I said, we love to have you back again. Like I said, join the panel when you can. Stop in. Join the panel. But Collective Foundations basically is 10 to 2 every Wednesday. It's open to everybody. This part is just the part where we do it on live, but the other part is just coming in, getting some education on even some of the things you're talking about. We're sometimes more business as far as the, learning some business skills, but definitely this is another part that we should add in there as well. It definitely gives them the motivation. If you're talking about goals, definitely gives you the education to say, oh shoot, now I need to worry about, on the back end of it as well, as far as, getting my, retirement together as well. But this concludes, some Collective Foundations. But again, we're on every Wednesday, 12 to 1. And like I said before, we're always, like I said, he was just grateful enough to, come in, but we're looking for other people, other insights, maybe we'll get that as well. So we want to thank you all. And like I said, we'll do it again next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.